2003. And with us today we have Mr. Robert Gummerus. This videotaped interview is being done by the Ashby Historical Society, participating in the United States Veterans History Project. That's a project in which our veterans from Ashby here have been asked to share their stories while they were in the armed services. The tapes are going to be kept right here in Ashby, and then will be listed and cataloged in the Library of Congress in Washington. Mr. Gummerus this morning has lived in Ashby all his life.
Practically. I was born in New York City.
Born in New York City. And when did you move to Ashby?
I came to Ashby the first time when I was 2.5 years old. Then I went back to New York, started my first grade in 1935. And then I moved back to Ashby in 1937.
So most of your life you've been in Ashby. That's right. The war that you were in was?
The Korean War. In fact, today is the 53rd anniversary of the beginning of the Korean War.
Is that right?
June 26, 1950.
I didn't realize that. Now, what branch of service were you in?
I was in the Army. I served as a sergeant in Korea. And I was primarily involved in keeping equipment operating. I was in an ordnance outfit, and we serviced the frontline units, artillery, armor, some of the infantry units, and along with the job of keeping the equipment operating, we did serve also on patrols and filled in with the rest of them.
Excuse me, Mr. Gummerus, will you speak up just a little bit?
All right.
Thank you.
How long were you in training in the States before you went to Korea?
I was inducted or drafted in February of 1951. I took my basic training at Aberdeen Proving Grounds in Maryland, and they needed technicians at that time. So they sent me to school in Chicago, to the Allied School of Mechanical Trades. You had to have experience in the mechanical line in order to get into the school. And they took 6 groups out there of 20 men each, and they were spaced 2 weeks apart. And we were billeted in the Harrison Hotel on Harrison Avenue, right off Michigan Boulevard. And we went to school there 12 weeks. On the completion of training there, some of us went to, I went to Korea. Some of the other classes went to White Sands Proving Grounds in New Mexico, and some went to Germany. But out of the 6 classes, I believe 4 went to Korea. And after we finished school there, we came home for 30 days. That was we went to school from middle of June to the middle of August. I came home on furlough, went back to Seattle, Washington, got on a troop ship, and we sailed for Japan and Korea. Going out, it was supposed to take us 10 days to cross to Japan. And we got into the middle of a typhoon with the troop ship. And we were in the typhoon for 3 days. And I'll never forget that experience. We were down in the hold. All the troops were in the hold. And when that typhoon hit, that huge troop ship used to balance on top of the wave. And then it would plunge down into the trough, and then come back up, while then the waves would just smother the ship. You would just cover the ship. And we did that for 3 days before it let up, and then we got back up on deck and got some fresh air. And it took us 14 days. We lost 4 days because of the typhoon.
You were just tossing around.
Just bouncing around out in the Pacific. So then, once we got to Japan, we got processed again got some more equipment, and we got on another troop ship and headed for Korea.
Let me go back to the troop ship you were going across on. Were you like 3-decked down below?
Well,
Or,
we were right down at the bottom of the ship, right down in the hole.
and your bunks would be
We were in hammocks.
hammocks.
We were in
How
hammocks.
many decks?
The hammocks were, they were 3 high.
3 high.
3 high.
Which one did you have? The top or the bottom
I
or the
had
middle?
I had the middle.
You had the middle.
I was in a middle bunk, a middle hammock. And that was one wild ride. And I never got sick though, I could say that. I rode that out, so I'm not, I'd like to go on a cruise today, but my wife is a little bit afraid of getting seasick, but I think I could ride out most of the
I'm
storm.
sure if you could ride that one, you could ride most anything today. They're so different anyway.
So then, after we left Japan, we headed for Korea. Went up through the LOC toward Incheon. Of course, Incheon was secured by that time. This was now in September of 1951. And once we got into Incheon, we got into a convoy and we went to Chuncheon, Korea. That was our first base that we set up. And that's the same time that they had the big battle on, I've got it on the map here in fact.
Maybe you can show us the map here.
That was on Heartbreak Ridge, which was in Kumwa Valley.
Do you want to hold that up maybe and so we can get
I don't know if you can really see this, but this was a Stars and Stripes map that came out in the Stars and Stripes. That was a military newspaper that was distributed to all armed forces.
Thank you.
Now where's the 38th parallel there?
The 38th parallel is right here. This is the 38th parallel, right in the middle of the country practically, right here.
Okay, and where did you...
This is Incheon here.
That's where you landed?
Yes, and this is Chuncheon here. This was our first base. And then we moved up to Kumwa Valley up in here. We were north of the parallel here. But that's where Heartbreak Ridge was. That was one of the major battles there.
And so your job was keep the
Our job was
equipment
to
rolling and...
keep the equipment rolling, keep the artillery firing. Whatever broke down, we would try and fix on the what we call the front line, and anything that was beyond our capabilities or equipment, then it would be sent back to rear echelons, and that would be repaired there. It might have gone back to Japan, or some of it might have come stateside even. But
So how close would you have been to the line of fighting there?
well, we were within half a mile.
Oh, within hearing distance, definitely,
Oh, yeah.
huh? Okay, so
Yeah.
you were close there. So were you there all the time?
I was there from September until August of 1952. In fact, in June of 1952, I came down with hemorrhagic fever, which they used to call Manchurian fever in that part of the country. But it had a 90% mortality rate at that time. And what would happen, you thought you were coming down with the flu, but then you got a 105-degree temperature. Of course, you'd go into a coma. And if you didn't come out of the coma, you didn't come out of it, period. I remember waking up in the alcohol and the ice bath in a field hospital. And I was there I was in the hospital from the middle of June until about the middle of August. And I finally got out of there and got back to the outfit, and we were just getting ready to rotate. So we were replacements when we went in for the company, and of course there were replacements that were replacing us when we moved out of there. And I came back to stateside I got back here in September. Reported back to Fort Devens, that's where we came in. And after a 30-day leave, I was reassigned to Fort Balboa, Virginia. And that was to the, I got reassigned to the 73rd Engineer Heavy Equipment Company in Fort Balboa. And I stayed there and I got an early discharge. I got discharged 2 days before Thanksgiving of 1952. And it was something you'll never forget, really. You made a lot of friends. You saw a lot of things you'd like to forget, but there's a lot of good memories too.
So you say you made a lot of friends. Have you been in touch with any of the friends that you made there? Have any of you kept in touch? Or?
In fact, there's a very good friend of mine lives in Rockport, Mass. And another one lives in Chicago. In fact, I was out there. We went out there June 1st of this year, 1st of this month, in fact. And we were out there 10 days, and I was able to hook up with him for a day, and we had a great time reminiscing. But we did keep in touch, Christmas cards and drop a note now and then. But we had a great day that day we went out, and it was just like, it's been 51 years since I saw him, really. And it was just like, he just took up from yesterday.
Yeah. Had he gone over with you in the same unit? Had he trained with you in that same unit?
He trained with me. I met him in school, but he was in the same unit I was overseas. We went overseas together.
You went over together.
And the one from Rockport also, we went over together.
Well, what would you say would be perhaps your most memorable experience? You've talked about the typhoon. Obviously, that was a big
memorable
thing.
one.
A very memorable one. I was also curious if any of the other soldiers got the hemorrhagic fever. Is that what you
There
call it?
were 5 of us
Was
from
it?
my company that came down with it, and
About the same time, was it?
same time, yeah. And 3 of them did not make it out of my company. Yeah. But overall, they had about a 90% mortality rate when it first started. What would happen? It affected your kidneys, and I suppose when they called it hemorrhagic fever, your eyeballs kind of hemorrhage, you're all red, and it affected your liver and your kidneys. That's what it did. And, when they first came down with it, you couldn't quench your thirst, and that was the problem. You couldn't get rid of the liquids either, and that was what's bringing the guys down. So they kept you off of liquid. I mean, they give you an ice chip now and then, but that was about all.
Where did you go to be in the hospital? Did you have to go back to?
No, there was a MASH unit. It was north of Incheon. And then they had an isolated area there for the hemorrhagic fever.
Now that's interesting that you say a MASH outfit. I didn't realize that was used other than in the movie. What does it stand for?
That was Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. That's what it stands for.
Army Surgical
And that's where they really started in Korea. I guess World War II they had some, but of course.
I've seen a lot of those, but I've never seen what the MASH really stands
Yes,
for.
and if you recall, on TV they had MASH, and
Right.
that was pretty true to life, really. It was. They didn't stretch it too much.
Yeah, well, they certainly, as you say, it wasn't too far from the front lines.
No.
They did what they could.
Yeah.
So,
You either came in on a helicopter or you came in on a plane when they evacuated to the hospital. I came in on a small Piper Cub. That's what they brought me in on. And,
were you on a stretcher at that point, or were you?
I was mobile at the
You were
time,
mobile at that
but
time.
I couldn't walk out of the plane. They took me on a stretcher out of the plane, but and that's when I went to the coma then. But the The nurses were fine. They took very good care of us, and the doctors.
Well, we're all lucky that you were one of those survivors.
Yeah.
I suppose in probably every unit. Do you think it was sanitation or what do
It
they?
came out of the ground. Of course, they use human waste for
Yes.
fertilizer there, and it was the rats and the whatever was around, and you just were breathing this dust all the time, especially in the summer months. It was if you were in the same area like we were, it would be 110 degrees in the summertime and 45 below in the winter.
Extremes.
It was one extreme to the other in the very same place. So most of the time they never shut the equipment down. They just kept it running because 45 below zero, you didn't jump in them and start them right up. But I don't know how the Koreans themselves, they seem to endure it fine. Very primitive, but they endured.
They grew up with, I guess.
There are some pictures here. This is the picture of our outfit here.
Can we zero in on that?
They're really too small.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And this is my vehicle here. I had a truck that was a mobile machine shop, really. And I would travel around with that where it was needed. And there's a picture of him right there.
Big Army Star.
Here's a picture of a typical village. And there's one of the, we call these the old papasans, the old grandfathers. Here's another one here with their long beards.
Papasan. Is that what they call themselves, or was that what you call
Well,
them?
that's what we call them.
You call them.
Yeah, and these, and there's the honey wagons right there. That's what they used to collect. That's they used to collect the waste in these here.
They liked it. They liked American too, I guess.
And yeah, there's a tank that was blown up that we had to get out of there. There's some more. That's just countryside there. This is entrance to our company.
You're
area.
well protected with bunkers, I see.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, being only a half a mile
Yeah.
from the
These
front
are all
lines.
sandbags.
A lot of mountains in
Oh,
Korea.
yeah, they were really steep. This is a quad 50. There were 4 50 caliber machine guns mounted on this unit here to use them for anti-aircraft.
And it was mobile.
Yes.
And you kept it working.
Oh, yeah, all these. That was a bank at one time. That was blown apart. In fact, this is a fellow from Rockport right there.
Oh. So these are all from around that Incheon where you, or the
Incheon, well, no, this is from Chuncheon and
Chuncheon.
from Kumwa.
north of the
Kumwa
38th
yeah.
power. Yes.
Well, Chuncheon was just south of the 38th, but Kumwa was above 38.
So what was the status of the work when you left?
When I left in '52, they were starting to talk about an armistice at that time. And of course, that never really took place until '53. And it was a ceasefire, really. There were no winners.
No winners, that's right.
There were no winners.
The Korean War that is often called the Forgotten War,
It's
it just
forgotten
sort of,
war. Yeah, it went back to the 38th parallel, really. After World War II, Korea was cut in half. The North was controlled by Russia, the communist, and the southern part was controlled by the Allies, the United States. And the 38th parallel was the dividing line, which was half the country. And when the war was over, it still established the 38th parallel was one half of the country.
And now we're having difficulties
Now we're having difficulties again. But,
back again.
But as I understand, that 38th parallel, that no man's land there has been patrolled ever since
Yeah.
by American troops or South Koreans.
I guess you would not recognize South Korea when you go back. They say it's something else.
No,
Some
I
of
guess
the most expensive hotels in the world.
It's a big metropolis, I know, but I know, I think it was 2 years ago, they had a large group that went over. Veterans could sign up and they could go and take a look. But I'm sure no one would recognize Seoul anymore.
No, it's must be really big changes, big changes. Well, let's see, now your parents were here in Ashby when you were there.
Yes.
Did you, I guess at that time you didn't have any trouble writing and there
No,
wasn't
we got
censorship or
correspondence
anything
back.
in the Korean War. Some of the ones in World War II, there were quite a lot of
Censorship.
censorship and so forth,
Yes.
but this was pretty,
It was pretty open.
how was the food? Were your rations decent or?
Our rations were decent. I mean, there were times when you didn't have much choice. But we had some pretty innovative mess sergeants there, and we could swap with other companies. You do a lot of battering.
Yeah. I think they're good at that in Korea anyway. The Koreans, that's the way they live. Did live anyway. Well, what did you all do for entertainment out in this forsaken land?
Well, we had a lot of USO shows.
Did you?
We had quite a few that came through. It stretches my mind now to recall exactly who they were. But we had some headliners come out. And we'd get, once in a while, we'd get a movie in there.
Once in a while?
Yeah, we'd get a
Not
movie.
too often.
No, once in a while we'd get a movie. And they set up a makeshift screen, but you know, we could see a movie. But there wasn't much else to do.
There wasn't much in town, right?
No.
So actually, you know, we see pictures now of the USO traveling and Bob Hope especially, and they really were within firing.
Oh yes, they
at
came
times.
right in
I
there.
mean, they were.
They came right to the units, right to the outfits.
That was a great day for the guys.
That was. They looked forward to it.
Did you have any leave time while you were there, or go into? It wasn't any place to go.
There was no place to go really, but when you were there, actually on points, you got so many points for being on frontline duty, and you could get R&R, rest and recuperation. They'd fly you to Japan. You'd be there a week, and you weren't billeted at a military installation. You were on your own. You could go to a hotel or what you wanted to do. You were like on vacation for a week in Japan. And when my turn came up, that's when I ended up in the hospital. So I missed out on that one.
Oh.
But
You didn't get that week in Japan then.
I had saved my money, and it was about 2 weeks before I was supposed to go that I came down with the fever. But that was the only place you could go.
Did you ever get there?
We came to Japan when we went overseas. We stopped there first.
But I mean, you never did get to.
No, I
take
never.
your-
No.
You did it in the hospital.
Right. So then when we rotated out, of course we went back to Japan first, and we got defumigated and turned in what equipment we had, and got issued new clothing and had a good meal. And when we got to Japan, we all had a steak dinner and a quart of milk.
Ooh, did that taste good?
That
Huh?
tasted wonderful.
Where did you land in Japan? Do you remember the base?
We went to, it was in Sasebo, the island of Sasebo. was they had a depot set up there for people coming back from Korea, getting ready to go to the States. So you got more physicals there and filled out more paperwork and finally got on board ship to come home. Coming back, we were there a week. And about 2 days before we were set the board ship and sail, they called out all the sergeants, and we went on board first for a reason. We were the cooks coming home. Of course, there might have been, out of all those sergeants that got on board, there might have been maybe a dozen that were mess sergeants. But the rest of us, well, actually, we handled the details in the kitchen. And we would be on, we'd start breakfast. We'd get in the kitchen about 4 o'clock in the morning, go on the galley, and get the breakfast going. And we'd finish up around 11 o'clock in the morning. Of course, they ate in shifts. You got in line for breakfast, and after you finished breakfast, you got back in line for lunch. And after lunch, you got back in line for dinner, for supper. Of course, you were on deck, you were just playing cards or reading. But, there was nothing else to do anyway on board ship coming home. But, they'd, I forget how many cases of eggs they'd use in the morning. Put them in big steam kettles and mix up scrambled eggs or oatmeal or whatever it was that they were getting for breakfast that morning.
If you had all those mess sergeants, you had good food.
Well, they had good food on board ship. I mean, there was plenty of it, depending on how it was prepared. But it was good food.
You all deserved it. But I guess some of these big liners, you have the same story. You get in line for breakfast, and then by the time you get through, it's time for lunch, I guess.
Yeah, that's the old Army story.
Did you play
Hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
You stand in line.
Did you play a lot of cards in Korea?
Oh, yeah, we had card games about every night.
Yeah, I guess most every unit did or something for. Yeah. And what was your favorite, and what did you get good at?
Well, we always played poker.
Ah.
You had to have a good poker face.
Yeah. Did you make any money?
Well, I made a little bit, but I sent home most of my money for a lot. My folks put in the bank for me. But I always kept some, and my friend Elmer from Chicago, I would always give him some money to hold for me. I said, if I'm in the card game and I want more money, I said, don't give it to me. And he was pretty good at that. I couldn't get the money out of him. Yeah.
So, now I have a question here. Do you recall the day that your service ended? Do you recall, where did you land in the USA, and what was it like?
Well, we came home from Japan. I remember coming under the Golden Gate Bridge.
Came under the Golden Gate Bridge. That's a wonderful sight. And did you all get up there and
we all saw it.
cheer?
We were all on deck watching, going underneath that.
Right.
And we went to Camp Roberts, and again we got processed there. We were there 3-4 days. And then we got on a train to head for Fort Devens. And that was a long train ride. I believe it took us about 8 days to cross. Because first we took the southern route, went down into Texas, then we went north up to Colorado, and we had a delay there for some reason or other. And then we headed north, crossed into Canada.
Oh my goodness.
And we went across Canada, and then came down the East Coast, down to Devens.
Down to Devens.
Down to Devens.
What was the reason for all that? Did they drop off people?
No,
or were you all going to Devens?
No, don't know why we went up that way. They never told us.
And you don't ask, right? I guess.
I don't know if it was because of other traffic on the tracks at that time.
I suppose.
Of course, there was a lot of train travel at that time,
A lot of troop trains.
and civilian travel also, in, in the early 50s.
True.
But, so they probably just shuffled us up there to keep us off the main line.
Did you muster in at Devon's? I forget to
Yes.
ask you that.
I was drafted, our local draft board was situated in Groton. So I had to report to Groton. And, well, in fact, the day I reported was, it's on here somewhere, 27th of February. That's when I reported to Groton. We got on buses there and went to Boston to the Army base in Boston. And we had a quick physical there again, just to follow up, and sworn in, and got back on buses and went to Devon's. And at Devon's, of course, we were processed again, more physicals, a lot of shots. They tested us for different things, see what they were going to do with us. Most of them went infantry, and I was fortunate enough. They held me back until they got the group together they wanted, and then we were sent to Aberdeen Proving Grounds. We took basic there.
I'm going to interrupt you a minute. Were you right out of high school, or I know you're mechanical, we'll get into that, you're very apt. Had you done some things to...
I was working at that time at Micro Tool.
Okay. So
After I graduated, I went as an apprentice at Micro Tool Company, and that was in 1947. And I got drafted in 1951, so I had...
So you had experience
Yes.
in this, and that
Yes.
stood you in good stead.
Right. That's why I was able to get into the school.
And why you became a sergeant very early on, apparently.
I received my sergeant stripes in May of 1952. So, but when you're in combat areas, promotions come fairly fast. So,
So you weren't at Devon's very long. It's just
no, I was only at Devon's in the beginning, probably 2 weeks. And I was there after we came back from Korea. I was at Devon's probably another week before I got transferred to Fort Belvoir, Virginia.
Do you have any brothers or sisters? Were you the only
No,
one?
I was the only one.
You were the only one, and so you were. So you, I'm sure you corresponded with your parents often, and vice versa. Well, after you got out, I know I can jump ahead and say that you were one of the principal owners of Micro Tool, but you say you were there right out of high school. So why don't you tell us what happened after?
Well, after I came back, of course, I went back to the shop, and that was actually I was early 53. I think I went back in probably January or February of 53, and continued working. And one of the original owners had passed away in 1960, and I was shop foreman at the time, so I was able to buy his shares. There were 5 active owners at that time, and I bought the shares of one of the owners that had passed away. And consequently, a year later, another member passed away, and I became president and general manager at that time of the company. And we had already, I jumped ahead a little bit. When we were in Fitchburg, we had a small garage up on High Street. And at that time...
Micro Tool wasn't in Ashby at that time.
No, it was started in
Fitchburg.
It was started in Fitchburg. And at that time, I believe we had 7 or 8 employees at that time. So then, in 1961, there was a sheet metal company in Fitchburg, Peterson Company, which we acquired. The person who owned it was very ill, and he wanted to get rid of it, so we made a deal and we bought it. And we had two different companies in Fitchburg. So then in 1968, we decided we needed bigger quarters. And at that time, Eddie Boudreau owned that land down on the state road. And I stopped and saw him one day, and we got talking about different things, and he said, "I'm selling that land up on the state road." I said, "What land?" He said, "Across from Freddie Whitney's." He said, "I got 55 acres there." I said, "Oh," he said, "Yeah, a fellow from Fitchburg's going to buy it, and he's going to put a big trailer park on it." So I said, "Have you made the deal yet?" He says, "No, he keeps talking about it, but he hasn't shown me any money yet." So he said, I said, "Would you sell to me?" He said, "The first person that brings me the check owns it." So I went right back down to my office and got a check and paid him. And that man never forgave me, but he never put any money up for it.
He never got his trailer park up there.
No. So then we built the company, we built a new building, and moved all our equipment there. And then that was in 58. 1960, 68, I'm sorry. And then in 1970, I moved the Peterson Company up, built another building for them with a connecting walkway through the two buildings. So altogether we had 16,000 square feet there and had 40 employees at that time. And we didn't have a product. It was all job shop. Tools, dies, special machinery, a lot of repair parts. If someone wanted a special machine to do a particular operation on something, we would build it for them and install it. So it was very interesting work. And in 1984, because I had had an aneurysm in 82, I started thinking that life's pretty short. And I had a willing buyer at a good price. In fact, it was one of my customers that I sold it to. And he bought it, and he kept it going for about 8 years, and then he ran into some difficulties, and he went bankrupt, really. And the building was empty for a couple of years, but a local company from Harvard bought it, J.C. Madigan. They install truck bodies, and he makes a lot of his own parts. So it is still a viable business in Ashby.
And it's very tailor-made for him, and
Yes.
he's keeping it in nice shape, as you did. Well, all the time you had micro tool. That was great. Now, one thing we haven't touched on, somewhere along there, Barbara came into the picture, and 3 or 4 lovely daughters. Is it
Yes,
3 or 4?
we have 3 daughters.
Three lovely daughters.
Barbara and I had been going together since 1949.
Oh, really? Before you went into service?
Before I went into service.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
I went into service, and when I came out, we picked up where we left off, and we were married in 1954. And we had 3 daughters. We're very proud of it, and have 3. Each daughter has a daughter, so we have 3 granddaughters, and that keeps us busy. One daughter lives in up at the White Mountains. My granddaughter up there is she's 8 in August. I have one daughter lives in Connecticut, New London, and she has a daughter that's going to be 3 in August. And I have one daughter that lives in Westford, and she has a daughter that's a year old.
So they keep you busy.
They keep us
They're
busy.
being close enough that you get to see them
Oh,
often.
yeah.
And
We spend a lot of time with them.
well, you weren't, after you sold the business, you weren't one to remain idle. I know that you drove some school buses for a while at special events, and as your wife says, you always want to be doing something.
My wife kept busy.
Oh, and I also forgot, you were very active in the veterans organizations here in town.
Yes, I was commander of the American Legion two different times. I was commander of the VFW in Ashby here for different periods of time. Belonged to the Masons. And I've kept busy. I was in the used car business for a while. I was innkeeper up at the Woodbound Inn in Jaffrey, New Hampshire.
Is that right? Since you retired? I didn't know
Oh yeah.
that.
Yeah, I was up there about 3 years. A lot of interesting stories there too. And I plowed snow for the state in my own vehicle down on Route 2. Did that for 14 years. But that was fun. And I've driven a school bus for the local school system, regional school system, but I primarily do the field trips, which are a lot of fun. I see a lot of things. Taken to museums, concerts, whale watching, you name it, we go there. In fact, I see my good friend up in Rockport when I take him whale watching. So I call him,
So
I
you
call
do.
Raymond usually a couple of days before I go up. And he meets me and we go and have a nice shore dinner somewhere and talk over old times.
Very good. Okay, have we left anything out, Bob?
No, I
Mr.
don't
Robert
think so.
Gummerus, I should say.
No, this is my old school building here.
That's true, you went to school here.
I went second grade here. I went second grade through sixth grade here. In fact, this was the fifth grade room we're sitting in right now, fifth and sixth grade.
Well, it's the coolest room when it's hot.
Yes.
You found that out.
No, this is the fifth grade room here. Sixth grade was upstairs.
That's right, they're getting up toward the high school. The
Right.
high school is upstairs, right?
So then we moved to Fitchburg for 3 years. And I went 7th, 8th, and 9th grade in Fitchburg. And then I came back to Ashby 10th grade and through 12 and graduated here. In those days, we had our graduation exercises down at the Congregational Church. And in my class, I had 12 students in my class. In fact, we were a quite large class at that time. Most of the classes had 5 or 6.
Have to talk about basketball. You were a big basketball hero in this town.
Well, we did play basketball. We had a great basketball team.
We always talk to the children when they come to the museum about our basketball team and how they played in the Grange, and we have the pictures and the trophies and all those things. And you were one of those big stars.
Well, I wasn't that big a star, but I did contribute. We did win the trophy. We won the tournament. That was in 1946. We played in Townsend, and we were kind of the underdogs, but we came out on top, and we beat Townsend, in fact, for the trophy.
Well, you were in good physical shape, and you stayed that way, and and that's probably one of the reasons that you survived this
That may be.
hemorrhagic.
That might be. I was hemorrhagic
hemorrhagic.
fever.
Yeah, you were kept in good condition.
When I went in the service, I was 220 pounds. And after basic training, they whittled me down to about 185. And when I came back from overseas, I was 134 when I came out of the
So you
hospital.
lost a lot.
So I was back down to my 32 waist, which I tried to hold on to.
Well, you've done a pretty good
But
job, I
it
would say.
didn't last too long.
Very good. Was there anything else any other questions which you would have?
Were you in Korea when MacArthur was recalled? And if
Yes.
so, what was the feeling of the troops?
Well, we never saw him really. But Ridgway came in and took his place. And of course, we tried to keep abreast of the political scene at home. Of course, Truman had words with MacArthur. MacArthur wanted to go a little bit further than most people wanted to go up there. He wanted to go into China, go over the line. But thinking back, it was probably a good idea we didn't go, because that thing would still be there probably. Yeah, there was a lot of controversy at that time. And one of the memorable things I remember was we got a list. In fact, I have it somewhere, but the Stars and Stripes published all the names of the prisoners of war that were given to us as being held by the North Koreans as prisoners. And going through that, there were quite a few friends of mine that I knew in there, and they did get back. They did get back, but they were held prisoner of war quite a while.
I'm lucky to get back.
Yes, they were. I believe there's still 812, I believe, is listed as missing in action.
It's with the black flag for that, right?
Right.
The MIA flag. You do it over the Legion Hall,
Yeah.
and the VFW gave us.
So you don't know how many were left there. I imagine if they were living at the time, most likely they passed on because they'd all be in their 70s now. Well, older. I was 22 when I got drafted. So, I was one of the older ones, really, at the time.
Yeah, that's true.
But there were a lot of holdovers from World War II that were there.
Is that right? Well, career people.
Yes, that were in
Careers,
Korea.
Yes, career people.
It wasn't that long after World War II that it started. Because we had a lot of troops there then, even for occupation. After World War II.
Well, you say our time is about up. Any other questions or anything else you want to add?
If there's any of these pictures you'd like
Maybe
to
you want to
keep,
get a close-up of a few of these?
if you want any of these pictures, you can have any of these you want.
Oh, you have, this is him in his truck. Got it? And this would have been in 52.
Quad 50. There's 450 caliber machine guns.